Hi, I'm Jason. Welcome to my channel. Today we're baking bread. Bread is one of the beautiful foods because it's my contention that the simpler bread gets, the better it gets. And with that in mind, I've developed a method for making it that gets rid of every unnecessary piece of equipment, that gets rid of every unnecessary step, that works to maximize the simplicity and flexibility of the recipe. So that means if you're just starting out on your bread baking journey, this is a great place to do it. If you already know how to bake bread, then maybe this is a good chance to learn how to simplify the process a little bit and make it easier to bake bread more often. Either way, you already clicked on the video, we're already engaged, so let's make some bread. So if we're gonna make a great loaf of bread, we need to ask, what makes a great loaf of bread? I think it's characterized by a thin, crispy outer crust that yields to a soft, chewy interior full of complex aromas and flavors that are entrapped by a network of air pockets. How do we achieve a bread like this? Thankfully, nature will do most of the work for us. What we need to understand is that we are stewards of a relationship. Great dough is a relationship between four simple ingredients. Our job as bakers is to bring them together and understand what they need so that we can foster a relationship amongst them where they balance and work together to extract every bit of potential that exists within that dough. All we need to do is introduce them and give them the time that they need to mature. So we're going to do that. And the short version of how to create a dough that really works as a bread dough is that we need to give it time to mature. We're going to give it about a day once we mix all the ingredients together, and we need to make it slightly on the wet side because we need to capture some of that moisture as steam during the baking process to let the bread expand properly and form the crust properly. That's the simple version. But the most important thing, I think, if I can get sentimental here a little bit, is understanding that great dough is a relationship. And much like a farmer that grows wheat doesn't grow wheat as much as they tend the soil that grows the wheat. We as bakers don't bake the bread as much as we create the dough that makes the bread. And I think that the harmonious relationship that we as bakers are looking to make in the dough is the thing that ripples throughout the world and that makes bread such a joyous thing to eat and to share with people. I've been making bread for over 10 years. I've done it at home for family. Countless times I've done it in a restaurant kitchen, and I still do not grow tired, and I'm still surprised by the joy that is brought to people through a great loaf of bread. And that's why I'm making this video and then subsequent videos I'm going to be making on bread. It's a really magical process, but it all comes from understanding that what we're doing here is creating a harmonious relationship within the dough and then letting that do the rest. Thankfully, nature does most of the work for us, and it ends up being really simple. So with that in mind, let's actually get started. Enough theory. Let's make some dough. Let's make some bread. Pictured here is everything you need to make bread dough. We've got our flour, we've got our yeast, we've got our salt. The water's still hanging out in the tap. Normally, I would measure all of this with a scale and get precise amounts. That gives you predictable results. But I'm here to show you how simple this can be, so we're going to do it simply. The only thing we're going to use is that mug to measure everything, and it's going to turn out just fine. So here's what we're going to do. Take 1 mug of flour. I'm not even going to level this off. You know, it's kind of packed because I put it in there, but 1 mug. All right, now we're mixing all of the dry ingredients together before we add the water. And that's because the yeast that I'm using is this instant kind of rapid rise yeast, and it's got a texture kind of like sand. So it's going to absorb the water that we add to the flour, no problem. If you have coarser yeast, it'll still work fine, but maybe dissolve it in a bit of the water just to make sure that it incorporates throughout the dough. So we're using this much, I don't know, 1/4 teaspoon, maybe 1/3 in there. We're going to add straight into the flour. Then we're going to go in, same with our spoon, we're going to put in 1 spoonful of salt. You throw it right on top of the yeast. It's fine because we're going to go in immediately with our fork and just make sure all of that stuff is incorporated. Now again, I've worked this out so I know that these amounts work fine. If you are not going to make this amount, you want a larger dough, you want a smaller dough, go to my website and kennedyfood.com and you'll see what to do if you have a scale to do it with. But so far so good, right? Now, we want to take this mug again and we want to fill it half full with water and add it. Here you can see half a mug of water. Now, one thing I do, which is not technically a part of this recipe, but I like to go in, take my extra virgin olive oil and add a little bit of that. What you get for that is a little bit of flavor, a little bit of conditioning on the dough, and I think it helps blister the crust a little bit too. So I add that. Now we're going in with a fork and we're just gonna bring this together. Because if you start with your hands, things can get a little bit messy. So what I like to do is just kind of incorporate the water into the flour thusly. And we're almost done here. This is a very simple process, and I want you to understand that this is easy. And again, we are stewards of this relationship. We're introducing all of these things to one another, and then we're creating a space for them to do what comes naturally, and then we're giving the time that it takes to happen. So you can see this is looking a little dry. To be sure, I'm going to clean off that fork and I'm going to get in there with my clean hands. Now, I highly recommend, if you're doing this with a child, that you get them involved in this part of the process because this is fun. Now, you can look and see this is a little bit shaggy, this dough. And this isn't quite what we want. The final texture of this we want to be a little bit wet. We don't want it to be a batter-like consistency, but it's gonna absorb water and kind of be a little bit more wet by the time we go to bake it than it is now. So we don't want any dry bits in the bottom of the bowl, and we don't want it to be shaggy like this. So I'm gonna go grab another, say, tablespoon of water. In fact, I think that's plenty. When you're incorporating more water, things can get messy, so. Just because I want to soak up that extra bit of water, I'm going to add a little more flour. So when you don't use a scale, sometimes you find this is the business you kind of have to be in. But what you want at the end of it is a bowl that doesn't have any dry bits. You want a dough that's fairly sticky, but when you hold it like that, it doesn't gloop away from you too quickly, but that you can tell already it's going to hold on to some structure. So I would say this is about exactly where we want to be. So there we go. We made our dough. That's pretty much all the work we have to do here. I'm going to wash off my hands. I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap. I'm going to put it in a relatively cool, relatively dark place, and I'm going to let it sit for until tomorrow this time. So about 24 hours, maybe a little less. So I will see you tomorrow, and you'll see what this has turned into. And here we have a finished dough. Let's get the plastic off here. This has been sitting for a little under 24 hours, I would say. So let's take a look at it, and we see there's bubbles. Those bubbles mean the yeast are doing their work. They're alive. Take a look at the texture. We see a nice amount of stretch. So this is lovely. This means that the relationship that we've been trying to foster has blossomed. So we've got gluten. We've got a lovely smell. It smells kind of like bread already. We've got those bubbles, those air pockets. We want to protect those. So this is dough. We can make this into bread right now, but we actually want to incorporate a little bit of extra structure, and depending on what your water to flour ratio was, this might actually be a little sticky at this point. So we want to kind of do a little bit of folding. It's a very simple process. What we're going to do, we're going to come in with the hands. We're going to lift and fold. Now we want to be gentle with this. See this nice structure here? We want to protect the little air pockets in here. We want to make sure we don't disrupt it too much. We're not punching this down, we are folding it. We want to take it, gently lift and fold. Lift and fold. Lift and fold. You know, we don't want to disrupt any of that air. Now, what I've just done here, this is it. We're done. This dough is ready. We can put this right in the oven right now. In fact, that's what we're going to do with this particular ball of dough that we have. We're going to grab ourselves a bowl. We're going to put a little bit of olive oil in there. Give it a coating. Now this is just to make sure that your dough doesn't stick. We also kind of want to give our dough a little bit of a coating. Just kind of, again, we're trying to protect the air a little bit. We're going to put it in there, get it coated with the oil. There. Now we're going to take that, cover it in plastic wrap, and this can sit in a fridge for maybe 5 days. This just came out of the fridge. This has been sitting for a few days, and as you can see, it's puffed up a bit. That's kind of what this will do. This is warm. This I only made yesterday. This was made several days ago. It's been sitting in the fridge since. We're going to bake both of these up, see what the difference looks like. This gives you maximum flexibility with maximum simplicity, which is what we're all about here. Two doughs, both made the same way. This one's straight out of the fridge. This one we just folded. They're both ready to be baked. Let's get into the baking process. There's one thing that we need if we're going to turn these breads into something that we're really happy with. To get the crust that we need to take the extra moisture that's in these doughs and turn them into steam in the oven to give us that crust. The bread expands while it's in the oven. That keeps the crumb from being too dense. It keeps the crust from becoming too thick and forming before the bread has a chance to expand. We need to trap that steam. There's a few ways you can do that. You can spritz water into your oven. You can put a sheet pan in the bottom or something heavy and throw water into that. I've done that a bunch of times. The thing is, what I've learned from experience is that most ovens are not that comfortable being turned into saunas, and they tend to break when you do that, and my oven at the moment is actually not working properly because I've done that. If you want to have an intact oven long term and you're baking a lot of bread, maybe there's a smarter way to do it, and I think the smarter way involves parchment paper. So we're going to use parchment paper to trap that same steam. If you have a heavy Dutch oven, that's a very popular way to trap the steam as well. It works really well. You get a nice crust. Works perfectly. But this is no special equipment. Using parchment paper, and we're going to get into this in some later videos, also gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of the shape of your bread. So that's what we're using today. So let's get started. We're going to bake up both of these simultaneously and see how they turn out. So what we're basically going to be doing is putting our dough down and using the parchment as if it were a lid, basically enclosing it. The idea is it just traps enough steam for the first 15 minutes of the baking process, give or take, to create the crust that we want and give the bread a chance to expand. After that, it's kind of done everything it's going to do. So we'll do our fridge dough first, and if you want, you can throw a little bit of flour down. You don't absolutely have to do this because the parchment is obviously non-stick. But especially if your dough is sticky, now this is not. This has been sitting in the fridge for a while and it's not a particularly sticky dough. But sometimes your dough will be sticky. This is about making this as simple as possible. So I don't want to fuss with this. I don't want to fold it again. I don't want to do anything. I want to take this and turn it into bread. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We do need to score it though, because that gives it some space to expand into. So I'm going to grab a knife. I'm going to use this serrated knife. Any sharp knife you have will do. And I like to, you can just do a simple score. You can do an X. I like to do a box. I think it looks nice. Now we're going to take one end of the parchment. We're going to fold it over. We take this. You get the idea. And then we're just going to See? Now, we want to give it, see, I can put my hand under here and I'm not touching the bread. We want to give it room to expand. If you do it up tight, then it'll kind of push this way and you'll get more of a log, which might not be necessarily a bad thing. But today we want to kind of keep a generally round shape. So I'm going to give it some room, and that's it. That's it. We just shaped our bread. That's it. That's done. So I'm going to put this to the side and we'll do the next one. Now this dough is going to be a little bit stickier. So I'm actually going to just give it a little bit of that. Now this, if you want to have an airier crumb to the dough that you just made, and you haven't had it sit in the fridge for a while, or you just want it to be airier, then, you know, by all means, let this sit. Put it in a bowl. If you have something fancy like a proofing basket, that's perfect. But otherwise, put it in a bowl, cover it, let it sit for an hour or two, and it'll puff up, and you'll get a more airy texture. You'll get bigger air holes, a better crumb. But this process is about no extra steps, and proofing is an extra step as far as I'm concerned. It's not absolutely necessary. We'll see what kind of texture we get out of this, and then it's up to you. So let's go grab our parchment. Here we go. Voila. Do another. You know. Okay, now we're going to take both of these and we're going to bake them. Okay, the bread's been in the oven for about 15 minutes with the parchment on. We're going to open up the oven and we're going to take the parchment off. It's done everything it needs to do at this point. Let's take a look. Okay, we're on our way to bread. Looking pretty good. Now we'll set a timer for about another 20 minutes, but we're basically just looking for color at this point. Presented for your consideration, 2 loaves of bread. This is the one that came straight from the fridge. This is the one that came straight from fermentation. Neither one of these have been proved, and they are both smelling fantastic. So, these are not the most technically proficient loaves of bread you're ever going to see. They're very rustic looking. The shape is a little irregular, but I'll tell you what, these are going to be pretty tasty loaves of bread, I have a feeling. But before we find out, we need to let these cool. You got to let bread cool for at least about half an hour. Cooling is an important part of the process because it gives the starches time to settle down. And if you cut into them when they're still warm, the starches are still kind of active and you end up with kind of gummy bread. Now, having said that, sometimes you don't want to wait, and there's worse things in the world than eating bread that's a little bit gummy. So if you are doing this for the first time and you feel like, I gotta eat this bread, I gotta put some butter on there and have it melt, then I don't blame you for that. And you know what? You should follow your heart and do that. I, however, am gonna let these cool, and then we're gonna cut into them and we're gonna take a look at what's happened here. Okay, it's been about half an hour. Our bread is cool. It's got a crispy crust. Now, it's time to see what we've done. So, we're going to cut into these bad boys. This is really the moment of truth. You ready? So this is the one that went straight from the fridge. That is a very nice crumb. Give it a smell. It smells great. That's bread. What about this one? We fermented the dough, no proofing, right into the oven. Let's see how this turned out. Again, nice crust. Slightly different texture, but still very nice bread. I think we made some pretty good bread here today. Only one way to find out. Could grab a piece. Yeah. Come on. Oh, it's delicious. You gotta get involved with this. If you haven't done this yet, please start now. Super easy. Again, this is simple, beautiful food. Make it for yourself. Make it for the people you love. I guarantee you, it's a crowd pleaser. Oh, it's so delicious. Have it with some olive oil, have it with some butter. Thank you so much for watching this video. Stick around because next time we're going to be sticking with our bread. We're going to be taking it up a notch. And I'm going to show you how to take this same dough that you've just made, that we've just made, and we're going to make baguettes. And then in the next video, I'm going to show you how to make a mind-blowing focaccia. Then we're going to move on to pizza. This right here, this is just the beginning. So stick around. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Diego, do you want some bread? Spin, spin. Good boy. He's very discerning. Good bread? Good boy. Good boy.